Oh man, Rob, are you ready to go?
What's up,
Because
buddy? Yeah, like I'm fall season's upon us. Glad to get back to our normal schedule. But yeah,
yep.
I'm good. I got my
Eh,
coffee caffeinated.
Oh, beautiful. I had mine. I wish I could have more, but I'm at that stage in life where I can't drink extra caffeine.
I
Otherwise, it
know,
truly affects me.
man. Just yeah, it affects the afternoon sleep, my anxiety. Like it's no bueno. But I do enjoy the one cup, and I've been saving it for like this hour, like that witching hour, where it's like now is the time I really need it. Right.
Yes, yes, yep, yep. You got to You got to maximize the
Mhm.
opportunity there of that caffeine high. Hey, you want to know what I've been curious about lately?
Yeah. What do you want to talk about today, man? I like our format where we're just kind of it feels like a fireplace or not a fireplace,
Fireside chat.
fireside chat, and that's
Yep.
that's how I like it. So what's on your mind, my friend? What can we
Yeah,
chat about?
we're riffing, and that's the whole point of this podcast is. And you know what? Honestly, I think this is our superpower. Is I Yes, I'm
I
sad that
do.
I don't live next to you. I can't just go over to your house,
An
but
in-person podcast would be pretty cool.
yes, but also, there's kind of, I think, a little bit of a gift in this that the layout is that I'm talking to you like over, social media or the phone or
Mhm.
whatever here and there, but we're not like always hanging out. So naturally, we just get the chance to riff off of each other too, and it's just
It's
like,
like it's like our life update show. Like that's what it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah, and we don't have to. I don't have to sit there and go, "Wait, did we talk about this already?" Or every time, me making a comment like, "Oh, like what I was talking to you on Tuesday," So yeah, but anywho,
Yeah.
today,
Top of mind.
but before we dive into the subject at hand,
Mhm.
the thing that I'm curious about, what I really want to know is who's going to be our first sponsor. You know,
I don't
I
know.
really I want to know because you got that cool mic there. One day I'm gonna have a cool mic. It's gonna be right
There you
here,
go. It looks
and
like
that's
oh,
gonna come from our first sponsor. I'm gonna put it right there. I'm like,
I
hey,
think
you know
I
what
think
makes this show
sponsor
better? It's all because of our first sponsor.
XYZ. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
whoever
You know
that
what? I
is.
think that'll come, but right now we are the sponsor of this show.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay? Yeah.
sponsored by us. You're
Yeah.
welcome,
And I think
you.
for a long while it'll be sponsored.
Hey, when we get up to like 20
When we
listeners,
have 20 listeners,
maybe.
ooh, we're going to Sizzler. We're
Yeah,
doing
baby. Oh, Sizzler, man, memories. No, actually, I don't. No, nope, nope. See, I went to Soup Plantation.
we had a Red
That was our
Lobster.
spot.
Ours
What?
was like the Red Lobster
You
or
got the
Friday.
biscuits, the
Yeah.
cheesy
Yeah.
biscuits.
Red Lobster or Fridays. That was like
Oh
our
man.
we did good in school. Let's go celebrate.
Hey, you know what? That's a perfect segue into our weekly segment of
Okay.
serving size, schmerving size. That's what we're calling it this week. The quick question for you to warm up your brain is
Yeah.
what is something that you eat that technically the serving size is, whatever, but
A box, like the
it
serving size
doesn't.
is the box.
No, 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 no. Just like, okay, serving size is like 5 nuts, but I
Oh
eat
my
like
goodness.
it by the handfuls, like what is the
Mhm.
thing for you or the things that you find that you think the serving size is inaccurate or you don't care?
Top of mind would be coffee. That'd be the first
Coffee?
thing. Yeah, because it's never just a cup. But that's a good question. Serving size. There are times in my life where I like weigh and measure everything, and that was cool for a short period of time. But I think the vice, right, the comfort area, end of the week or celebratory meal kind of thing. I think sweets, any kind of dessert for me, like on a Friday night or Saturday night, I didn't even know there was a serving size. I thought the pint was the size.
Yeah.
Um, so when it comes to like Oreo cookies, right? Like, oh, it's you can open and close it. No, there's no closing. There's an open. And so I think for me, because I'm not, enticing myself every day for that kind of stuff, when the time comes, I just enjoy it. And I think over the years, I know what's enough. Like, oh, I don't want to get a stomach ache, but I can definitely tell you on all scenarios, it's more than the serving size.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about
And,
you? Like, what's your
granted,
go-to
uh, you
non-serving
know,
size?
I'm proud of you in this moment. I just want to say, guys, everybody, the Rob is the guy who's giving me the health advice. We're talking to a health guru here.
it's
And
realistic
so
for our
you,
season. I'm not going to say
yeah,
like, oh, don't ever eat dessert. I'm like, come on, like we
yeah,
have
no, no, no.
kids. They're going to
Yeah,
stare at us if I'm eating broccoli and they're having a cup of ice cream, right?
seriously. So, I would say some of the things that came to my mind were like the pirate's booty, like the
Oh,
puffs.
100%. Popcorn just in general. I don't think there's
I
a
mean,
serving size for popcorn.
well, I was just checking the bag and it's like 7 servings per bag. And I'm like, usually it's like one, like
You know what?
I just have to stop myself at half the bag and then I have the second round for later. So
I literally, we just did this yesterday. So like, Mo and I were like having like the after dinner snack. Kids are asleep, right? And we're like, okay, let's do the hummus. And then we crushed like half a container of hummus, and both of us like, oh, I don't know. I was like, let's look at serving size. And we looked at
yeah,
serving size, but it was like 5 serving sizes. But if you go down the rabbit hole a little bit more, it still like 150 calories. Like it's hummus. Like don't worry about the serving size, right?
yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't have the same discussion with the ice cream that followed. But the idea is, serving
Yeah,
size one thing, total calorie intake, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times as parents, we are already hard on ourselves, right? And if you're already doing a pretty good job, like celebrate the pretty good job, right? You're going to be a parent for a long time. So there's no need to be like super strict on everything. It's already hard enough. So yeah, like do I look at labels? Sometimes if I'm wondering, like, man, this is really salty, let me look at the salt. Or sugary stuff, like I'd rather eat my sugar than drink my sugar. So those are like small things for me. But yeah, like serving size, I don't pay attention. I just know that hey, I'm full, it's good, or I'm about to be full, that's good enough.
look at you coming in with the wisdom. I was going to ask you, like, what do they even come up with the serving size? What's that all about? Because, yeah, but and we obviously know, I think we've even touched on this maybe in previous episodes. I don't know. But it's more about holistically, what about
Big
across the
picture.
board? I
Yeah,
mean, it doesn't matter if you pay attention to the serving size. If you're eating 12 different things for one meal, then you're
exactly.
probably going to be over in whatever nutritional things you need for your
Exactly.
body. So, yeah, that just came to my mind. I was eating a handful of nuts the other day, and I thought,
Nuts are another
you know
hard one,
what?
right? It's like
That's
9 almonds is a serving size. And who counts out 9? Now, if you're counting your macros or you're doing zone, yeah, by all means do you. But for most of us, it's
yeah,
just like I've got a bowl of almonds because I'm working at a desk, and that's just how it is, which is
yeah,
fine. Just to notice if you're going back to refill it all the time. So that's where you get into the rabbit hole.
yep. The cereal is what kills me. Is every cereal
Oh
out there is
man,
like a
cereal,
serving size is three
half a cup,
quarters of a cup, or
not
yeah,
including milk.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And who in their right mind eats a
What
half a cup
happened?
of
What
cereal?
happened to you as a child that
Yeah.
you're eating dry cereal, right?
Oh boy. Yeah, totally.
Mm.
So, and again, it's like you knew this inside. It's like your segues are perfect. You talked about, hey, the enemy of great is or good is the enemy of good is great. What you basically said, hey, we're hard on ourselves sometimes,
Yeah, we are.
and we're gonna talk about that today.
Let's
Today, the
go. Yeah,
subject at hand. I was watching the Olympics a little while
right.
ago,
We've been watching
and
too.
as they do, they had a little intro for Caleb Dressel, a swimmer, and he was talking about some of the therapy that he's done.
Mhm.
And his therapist was talking to him, has start introduced this concept to him of there's Caleb and then there's the critic, and so it's balancing his personality with or his goals with the critic inside, right? And
Mhm.
so a lot of us call that critic something different. For any of you listening who like come from a faith background, might call that spiritual warfare. But we all have that voice inside of our head that's telling us things that's not helpful.
Mhm.
Or maybe it is helpful. So that's what we're going to get into today. So
Great topic.
first off,
Yeah.
First off, Rob, let me ask you this, since we're riffing here. So
Mhm.
when I talk about the critic or
Mhm.
that voice inside your head, what's the first picture you get of that in your own day to day? Where do you see the critic rear its ugly head? in your life most
So
often?
first off, everywhere, right? As a parent, as an entrepreneur, right? Even working out in the garage, like there's always that kind of self-talk, right?
Yeah.
So for me, my critic or the self-talk definitely stems from my environment that I was raised in, right? Like lawyer, doctor, businessman, straight A's, or else kind of a scenario. And
Mm-hmm.
that ended up leading into a lot of how I viewed myself or what success was, right? What achievements were. So my
Yeah.
self critic is definitely molded by that. And then as I grew older, more experienced, um, and became a parent, the critic slowly changed into a voice of like, I always want to provide above and beyond, right? It's just kind of call it environment grew up in, call it childhood traumas. But now it's the self critic. It's like, you can always do better, right? Like, am I doing enough? Like, that's the question. It's not a negative, like, hey, put that spoon down for the ice cream. But it's like, you had an opportunity to do better, right? Like, what's that choice? So I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say it's a gentler voice. It's almost like it's attacking from a different angle, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I deal with that daily, and so my self-care practices, my scheduling, right, my routines, my rituals, that quiets the voice. The voice is always there, but now it's more like, imagine, I use the analogy of a movie theater. Growing up, the person was sitting right next to me or right behind me. Now it's more like 18 rows, top corner. Hey,
Yeah.
Rob, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'm aware of it. And the more I'm aware of the source of it, the less it affects me. And it just reminds me, like, hey, if I'm not doing my day to day, that's when that critic moves up a row, right? A couple rows and stuff like that. So as long as I'm taking care of myself, as long as I'm feeling fulfilled in this chapter, right, as a dad and stuff like that, then the critic's actually not too loud. I noticed the critic during lulls, big transitions in life, summer vacation, when the schedule changes. When I finish a project and there's like a week or two of like this next project hasn't started yet,
Mm.
that's when the voice is the loudest because it's when my mind in the space is the most calm, right? Because that's when someone wants to come in and ruffle up the feathers a little bit. And
Yeah.
so when I'm working, when I have something to do, when I'm on my schedule, on my routine, I'm doing the stuff, the voice is very faint and I know it's there. It's always going to be there. But during the lulls, during the transitions, during the quote unquote downtime, which it should be, that's when he moves up a couple rows. So that's what it's like for me. Started with environment, transitioned into more of like, be it needing to be liked, needing to provide, but because of that, it just changed angles. It's still the same harshness, but it's, well, if that doesn't work, let's try this angle kind of thing. But
Yeah.
how about you? Like, how's the inner voice, the critic, the shoulder talker? How's it show
Yeah.
up?
Yeah. Um, for me, most certainly when I am not in my routine, I definitely hear you on that one.
Yeah.
And for me, routine is a struggle. I think I just naturally am one of those people that's just, yeah, more naturally prone to sit on the couch rather than do the thing I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I feel like I have to fight a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But um, I would say, yeah, yeah. I like, again, like based off of my faith background,
Mm-hmm.
um, there's uh, there's a verse that talks about being sober in spirit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so there are times when I'm like quote unquote drunk in the sense of like laziness or what have
Mm-hmm.
you, and I'm just like in this like perpetual cycle of not of non-sobriety of my spirit, my
Mm-hmm.
mind, when I
Yeah.
get into the routine of things, right? Or like if I stick with a rhythm and I- I'm more focused on the priorities, the things that really matter, then yeah, that the critic recedes, right? Like obviously, like it's full bore when I'm distracted because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, now's the time to mess with Travis's
Mm-hmm.
head. I
Mm-hmm.
like how you talked about like that time in between, um, because it feels like, as especially as a parent, I feel like it's more natural to be in seasons, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
rhythms. Um, because kids in school and in different growing stages, it just more naturally occurs, right? Compared to pre-kids. But um you get out of your flow, and
Mhm.
all of a sudden you're like, what am I doing? And I think if this is I tell her this all the time, so like I think it's okay. Deb, it's like her superpower, and also like difficult sometimes, in
Yeah.
that she notices those changes
Oh yeah.
in rhythm like real quick. So she's my like barometer, right? So she can
Mhm.
call it out before it's a thing. And back when we were early married, it was like I took that as an insult of like a I'm not a horrible
Yeah.
person. I just
Yeah,
played
yeah.
one video game for
It's almost
10
like an attack.
minutes, you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like but it now, I'm able to translate that as like, hey, this could be a trend. And we
Yeah.
don't want to go down that road. We want to pick
No.
the other the fork in the road,
You know what?
the other
That's
road.
interesting because I've had the same situation in my marriage and in parenting where in the early years of both the relationship and having kids, that critic or that voice of distraction or not good enough. The funny thing is like there were signs and symptoms, right? Now looking back, and I remember before I needed someone to point them out. Like, hey, we're veering off the path a little bit. And you're like, oh wow, like I didn't even know I've been gaming for 4 hours, or I didn't know I watched 12 episodes on Netflix straight through.
Yeah,
Like okay,
yeah.
okay, got it. But the great thing about my relationship now and the season of life I'm in now is my partner is willing to let me tread the water a little bit so that I
Hmm.
realize the signs and symptoms, and then I get myself out. Does that
Yeah.
kind of make sense? So early
Yeah,
on, it was
yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
I don't even know I'm in the deep end. I'm having fun and stuff like that. Whereas she knew my goals, she knew my aspirations. She's like, hey, we're kind of falling off the path a little bit. Whereas now it's like it's seasonal, right? During my lulls, there might be a couple days where like, yeah, I'm gonna binge watch some Netflix. But then you know what? I knew I could have made a better decision, and I get myself out of that, right? And so instead of going up against that inner critic, I'm just like, thank you. Now you're more of a warning signal than anything else, right? Like I know if that voice is loud, I'm veering off the path. And so the quieter it is, the more that I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So yeah, just
Yeah.
like you, like I'm so happy
Yeah.
early on, she'd be like, hey, do you really want to play WoW for that long? I mean, you can. I'm like, oh, actually, no, I don't. I'm supposed to be doing work right now. So
Yeah.
same boat, same boat.
Yeah, yeah. So you almost can utilize it as like an alarm system these days,
Mhm.
a little bit of like a, warning on the dashboard. Like, okay,
And
I gotta.
as a quick tangent, like hopefully, if you guys aren't in a relationship like that, that you do eventually get to a point where your partner is on the same team, right? You talk about your vices, you talk about your critic, you talk about where you feel low, and so that they can pick up the weight, right? They
Mm,
can remind you and to be your boundary and to help play defense a little bit, and having that teammate there, that partner in there, and you do the same for them. And what I realized with that relationship, not only through honesty and trust, but the critic really ends up losing grasp on you, right? It's not as
yeah.
strong, right?
Yep.
Because now it's two versus one, right? It's not just one versus one. And
Yep.
so, I wish for you guys. I mean, that's been a real big foundation in the ability to overcome the critic, in the ability to move forward, or to get out of that loop of binge watching Netflix. Or we all have that thing we do when we don't want to take the next step, when the critic's kind of overwhelming us, and we want to just be status quo for a second, but a second turns into an hour turns into a week, right?
Yep.
So it's good to have that partner.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that sidebar. That is required. I think that's
Mhm.
great. As yeah, if you don't, and even if you don't have a spouse in on something like this in this season of life, you it can be a friend, it can be a therapist,
A
like
community, like
you
yeah,
want to have somebody that you are, regularly, in relationship with, that
mhm.
you can share those things. And if you don't have that person, um, would highly encourage it. It's huge to have somebody who's in your corner, somebody you can trust who is willing to duke it out with you when you're not at your best,
Mhm.
right? So, yeah. So I wrote down this question of, uh, how is the critic helpful versus being harmful? Now, in my head, I think probably, I don't know, just spitballing here, probably is like 95% harmful and 5% helpful, or maybe 90% helpful and or harmful and 10% helpful. Because you talked about that, right? Utilize it as like an alarm system.
Mhm.
Um, but in the context of Dressel, when he was talking about it, right? It loomed over him, kind of like it ruined this high point where he in his career where he gets all the gold medals and immediately leaves that and is like, I should have done better, I can do better, I should, and the critic just comes in and like robs him of all that joy
Mhm.
and that season of being able to, rejoice in in his hard work, right?
Mhm.
So that's where we see the harmfulness of it. But at the
Mhm.
same time, right, some of that, I guess you could say, pushes you forward, right? In the sense of, hey, you know, I can be, I can be better at this, or I need to adjust this. But I don't know if I want to call that the same thing. Like, I don't know
Mhm.
if I want to say that's the critic. I want to, maybe it's like the your mindset against the
Mhm.
critic again. So maybe the critic is all bad. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's context. I really do think as far as like, yeah, we always want to do better, be it as a parent, as an adult, as an employee, as an employer. Like we always try to do better. But what I think happens, and this is just talking from my experience, and I've had a lot of this in sports, in business, and that kind of the two metaphors is like, you finally get to the top of the mountain, you realize there's taller mountains. And if you don't celebrate that, you end up just keep climbing habitually for the rest of your life and never really experiencing joy.
Yeah.
And it was a struggle I had early on with sports and even with entrepreneurship is when you start to mix your identity with accomplishment, that's when I think the critic can be a negative thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I explained this a lot of times where it's like I could have all the medals in proof of accomplishment, but I can't recall any experiences of the accomplishment because I was so focused on winning, so focused on hitting a revenue number, so focused on this that it became my identity. That the urgency was to do better, to get more, to accomplish more. But that has very little to do with how I feel joy, loved, how I feel accomplished, right? It has very little to do with the checks and balances or how many medals are hanging on the wall. But it wasn't until I was older that I could separate those two. So I think with a lot of athletes I've worked with, myself, or just other dads, other parents, like when we tie in, well, I want my kids to be successful. And whatever we have a context of what that looks like. And if it doesn't match up, we feel like we're failing. We feel like they're failing. And so we put too much weight on accomplishments, right? We put too much weight on placement. Whereas I think there's other measuring sticks. If you are secure in your identity, if you're secure in what brings you joy, right? And you're secure in your own self kind of actualization, then I don't think the critic has a lot to do there. Now, the opposite side of that, context, right? So when will I allow, man, you should have done better? In certain contexts of business, in certain contexts of coaching or sports, like, man, I would have loved to told Travis this metaphor about this. Okay, do it next time. But it's not linked to, well, I feel better, but like it makes me feel happy when I do X, Y, and Z. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep.
So I think with context, I think being critical, I think that's really strong verbiage. I audit how I'm doing. I review in order to do better, but I'm
Yep.
never critical with like a scalpel. Like, hey, let's go through every single Excel sheet line because you can get caught up with that. And I see a lot of it. And a great little tangent is with nutrition, right? A lot of people get caught up with weighing and measuring. Like, I fell off the horse. I ate an additional almond, which was supposed to be 8, not 9. Like that's hypercritical, right? That's like too much to the
Yeah.
point where you go off the deep end, or you go way too much, right? Where you're unhealthily weighing and measuring everything. So I think that same scenario runs through every version of your lifestyle. Could be in your relationship, could be in your parenting, could be employer employee, right? If you're too hypercritical, that's not healthy as well. But it's because you're tying in your identity to your actions, right? To your performance. And so that's
Yeah.
where I think that can be an issue. But I think regular audits, regular reviews is a good thing. How do you know that you're growing unless you audit it, right? How do we get plants to grow better? You prune them, right? Like there's this action of like, hey, this direction is not working for us. Let's trim that and keep going here. But I think you can do that lovingly. I think you can do that with support and grace. I don't think it has to be like, hey man, Shane did better this week. Why didn't you do better? Yeah, it doesn't need to be like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if there's a message that we could send out to the dads this week, it's that you're harder on yourself
Oh, 100%.
you ought to be,
Mhm.
and give yourself some grace.
Mhm.
And I guess the question you can be asking yourself is, do you find yourself criticizing inside, or do you find yourself reviewing?
Mhm.
Because those are two different things. And maybe the question also is, um, how do if somebody's out there and they're like, yeah, I'm my own worst critic. Yeah, like, yeah, that's my voice in my head all the time is telling me that I'm not good enough, or I need to be a better parent, or I need to be a better uh, coworker, or like whatever the case may be. How do we adjust? You're really good at this, Rob. Those baby steps as a coach. Is there anything that comes to mind off the top of your
Yeah.
head to
Yeah.
adjust, as whether maybe it's from an entrepreneurial standpoint, also for sure from a dad standpoint?
Yeah,
What
this
does that
this
look like?
this works if you're in a season of like a lull, or if you're in this transition and you feel like you're being hypercritical of yourself. One of the things that I used to do, and I still do when I find that, is first being aware of it, right? That you are in a lull, that you are being hypercritical with yourself, and being that anxiety, depression, like there's signs and symptoms. And the first thing is to be aware of that. So having a good group of people around you that can be like, hey, are you good? Right? Be it a spouse, community, friends. And then once you know that, I'm all about action. So it's not just knowing that I have the critic, like I could do better, I could do better. Okay, what's the action? And are you taking that action? Like, man, I know I should be walking more. That's great. We all know that. But what action are you taking to do that? Lacing up your shoelaces every morning? That's the first step. You don't even have to go for a walk. Just put on shoes and lace them up. That'll lead to the walk, right? Oh, I know I should be going to bed earlier. That's great. What's the action? Setting an alarm in the evening, right? Man, I could be a better father. What does that mean, right? Maybe being more present. Okay, guess what? I'm going to put my phone on airplane mode during 3 p.m. to bedtime, right? Because I don't need to pick up that phone. So awareness is the first step, but then what are the actions? Baby, low hanging fruit. What's the first step you can do? Because we all know the actions, but we're not taking the action, right? So what are some triggers? What are some rituals, right? Because we're doing this for us or for others that we can embed in our daily routine that allows us to take action against the critic, right? Because if you're not taking action, that's where popcorn gets broken out, and that self voice gets louder and louder. But as soon as you take action, right, that voice will start to quiet. Why? Because your focus is now on something versus focusing on that critic.
Mm, mm. This is everybody. If you're listening in right now, this is your point where you press the rewind button, like,
I
3 minutes, and
think
just
this is
listen to
where
all
we
that one more time.
we do that. Like this is where we do the YouTube short, right? It's like that, just
Yes.
that section. Yeah,
Whew, that was
yeah.
good. Yes, yes, yes. So, man, that is great. And now moving forward, something else,
Mhm.
specifically since we're dads in real life and we're
Yeah.
talking about fatherhood, here many a times. You mentioned the environment that you grew up in
Mhm.
shaped some of the critic that's inside of you, for
Oh yeah,
sure. But
100%.
then also, I'm thinking ahead, right?
Mhm.
As dads, really at any stage. This
Mhm.
is the thing, is I think we always, again, the critic speaking, we can always get to this point where we feel like, oh, it's too far. Like I've gone
It's
too
never too late.
far. Yeah, but it is truly never too late. So,
Mhm.
um, what type of environment are you, giving your kids in regards to shaping? How is that inner critic potentially being shaped inside of your kids?
Mhm.
Um, as you as a father are making an imprint an impact on your kids.
Great
um
question. This could be like a totally different podcast just on this one question. So I'll try
yes, and
my
that's
best.
no, and what I'm saying is that's a question for everybody. That's just
Yeah.
like I want people to sit
You know what? We
on
might
that.
leave. I might talk a little, or we might leave with that question. And
Yeah,
then
I
on
think
the
that's
next
it.
week, right? Because this one, like, this is huge, right? It's
Yes.
huge. And it's
Yep.
something I think all parents during like the initiation of being a parent you think about, but it can be quickly forgotten with the layers of to-do lists and busyness that life gives us. But it is huge. You have the opportunity to break a cycle and
Yep.
create a new one. And I think, man, that's yeah, that's going to be a good talk. I think
So let's put a pin in it. Yeah, and
yes,
we'll let that float with everybody else, and then we can make that our
man,
next topic. But
that's next week's podcast. Like, what are we doing
woo,
now to create the support, right? To create an environment that our kids thrive in, that the environment we didn't get the opportunity to have, or maybe we wish certain things, and how are we doing that? Like that's man, that'd be golden, right? I would save and download that talk to remind us that hey, I'm doing the best I can. I am doing something different, right? And then these are the steps I'm taking. So
yep, yep. All right. Well, hey, Rob,
yeah,
it's been a pleasure as always.
always, man.
Just
It's good
riffing.
to see you and hear you.
And guys, remember, we are not professionals by any
No,
means.
no, we're not gurus. We're
We
just
are just dads
two dads
in
in real life.
real life.